How's everybody doing? All right, good to hear. I want to tell you a little story. There was a plane that was coming into land, and just right before it touched down the runway, it hit a wind shear, which is a sudden change in wind direction or velocity. This caused the plane to hit the runway wrong. At that point, the pilot took the plane back up in the air, circled around, and came in to a nice, smooth landing to the appreciation of the passengers on board. That was a story that John Maxwell was telling about. And for those of you who don't know John, he's a best-selling author in the area of leadership. And he had just finished a week-long book tour. And he was on his way back home, and that happened as they were coming into land. When he got off, as he was getting off the plane, he saw the pilot, and of course he thanked him for landing the plane safely. But he said, "I have to ask you a question. When that plane hit the runway wrong," he said, "immediately we were back up in the air." I mean, it's like instantaneously. When did you make the decision to take that plane back up? And the pilot said, "I made that decision 20 years ago. Because as a pilot, I looked at all the different things that could go wrong, and I just decided if the plane ever landed wrong, I was going to take it back up in the air because there's a lot more room up there." So part of what this section is actually going to be looking at is, hey, what are we going to do? What's our plan if our plane hits the runway wrong, when things don't go the way we expect them to? And we're also going to be looking at some of the things involving safety for us as employees. What are some of the things in place to help us to work safely? And one of those things is what you call the hazardous communication plan. And if you ever are a little bored and you want to do some reading, I think there is a copy of it at the reception desk if you want to look through that. But there again, it's all about helping us to be able to work with the chemicals we have in our facility and to do it safely. And one of the things that that plan says is that all containers must be labeled. So let's suppose you grab a spray bottle and you fill it up with water. Does that need to be labeled?
Yes.
Yes. Why would you have to label it? It's just water.
Because other things look like water.
Right. Because there's other things that can look like water. So that's why we have to label it, even if it's a spray bottle with just water in it. And another thing is, each chemical is to have a safety data sheet. And in the past, you may have heard of those referred to as material safety data sheet. And if your department would happen to get a new chemical in, and you get a safety data sheet with that chemical, either give it to Jeremy or myself, and then we can take care of it from there. One of the things I do ask, if you do happen to put one in one of our mailboxes, please also label the department that it's from. Sometimes I get a data sheet without knowing where it came from, then I have to go around and try to figure out which department it's from. Because each department is going to have their own book of safety data sheets. And for those of you in nursing, it's up there at the nurses station. There's one on each floor. Just look for the black and yellow notebooks. And then also up at the reception desk, there is also a master set up there as well. And some of those you may notice some orange in that notebook, and that just means that particular chemical is considered corrosive. And one of the things about chemicals that are corrosive, it's not a one-size-fits-all. How many of you have ever had the experience of being out in the sun a little bit too long? When you're out in the sun, you may not really think about it. When do you think about it? Yeah, later that day, when the sun has already done its damage. And chemicals can sometimes be a little bit the same way. You may not feel it doing its damage immediately, but it can still be causing damage. And of course, some of the things we have is also personal protective equipment. And one of the things in that safety data sheet book is we have a PP hazard assessment specific to your department. So in this particular example here, let's look at using knives. Okay, using knives, That's the activity up here. Could you be exposed to? You could be exposed to sharps injuries, tools and materials that could scrape, bruise, or cut. And then over here, what PPE can you use? Cut-resistant sleeves, wristlets, or gloves. So there again, probably not a bad idea if you have a moment sometime to go ahead and take a look at that. I know one of the things I found at one time in our particular manual, there were some PPE listed that we did not have, like the cut-resistant gloves. They were in there as PPE, but we didn't have any of them. Now we do have cut-resistant gloves, and yes, there are times I could have used the cut-resistant gloves.
There's been more than just one time.
Okay. Thank you, Sandy.
No problem.
Okay. Is there anything we can explain more on that particular part there? Okay. GHS. Basically, with the safety data sheets and labels and stuff, a few years back, there was an initiative called the Global Harmonization System. And basically what it did was it set out to standardize so the way we communicate about chemicals from a lot of different countries. So it just made everything a little more standard. And it really makes it easier for us, especially if we're going to be looking at the safety data sheets. We'll get into that a little bit later as to why that would be. But they do have several key components in there. And first we're going to look at pictograms. Now in your packet today you got a thing of pictograms. And the pictograms are actually, there's 9 different ones. And that sheet actually has the 9 on there. We're going to just give you a few minutes to see if you can match up the pictogram with what it actually is. So, just like back in school. And then after we're done, we'll go ahead and go over it and see how you did. I think you'll find some are very self-explanatory, and then other ones might be a little more challenging as to what they actually are.
Oh, really? Huh. No, I don't. Do you want me to go get? Yeah. You need 2 triple A.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we'll do one more minute, then we'll go over and see how we did. Okay, we ready? All right, here we go. What's this one? What letter? You said B, that is correct. Do we have anything in this facility that would fall under this one? What do you think it would be? Oxygen, all right. There's also another thing that we have that would fall under there. This is, think activities department. Helium, you got it. All right, good job. Correct. All right, what about this one? D, yes. What is an oxidizer? Basically, thank you, Jeff, appreciate it. Basically, an oxidizer would kind of act like oxygen. It's going to help fuel burn better. So if you would have an oxidizer with a flammable fuel source, the two together could really make things happen pretty quick. So that's kind of what an oxidizer does. What about this one? This one seems like it's been around a long time. F, correct. Okay, what do you think? Just call it out. If you said C, you got it. That's one of them that seems pretty self-explanatory. And what's that one? H. Yeah, hopefully we don't have any of those in our, in our facility. Okay, what about this one? Very good. I. Okay, the health hazard? A is correct. That one is E. Now, when I say that's non-mandatory, that is before OSHA requirements. That's not to say there isn't a, there might not be some other areas where the government would require that to be on there. But as far as OSHA is concerned, that's not a mandatory pictogram. And then finally, the last one?
G.
G. And that's the one that you're going to see printed on orange paper in the safety data manuals. Okay, some of the other things that the global harmonization come up with is what we call signal words. And signal words, we often hear these with weather. What are the two we often hear associated with weather? A thunderstorm's coming, a tornado's coming. What's the two words that we... Warning? And watch. Yeah, so for weather, the signal words are watch and warning, with warning being the higher level. When it comes to chemicals, signal words are warning and then danger being the higher level. So if you have a chemical that does not have one of those words on it, does that mean it is, you don't have to worry about it? There's no danger of working with that chemical. There still could be some danger associated with it. Kind of like, let's suppose we have a snow flurry. I don't ever recall hearing a warning or a watch for a snow flurry, but can snow flurries make things a little more hazardous for us?
Yes.
Yeah, chemicals are the same way. Another thing that they have is what they call the hazard statement. And these hazard statements, a good example of these would be, if you decide to drink or eat this stuff, then it's not gonna be good for you. Or, this in here I'm sure is one we often see. You go to the gas pump, probably can see this in the flammable liquid and vapor. So there are examples of hazard statements. A precautionary statement, it can address 4 different areas: the prevention, response, storage, and disposal. And here's 2 of them. This one here would be, I believe the first one would be like a response, or prevention. You know, you don't want to be eating your lunch while you're working with this chemical. It could be some not so good side effects with that. And then the second one, keeping the storage container tightly closed, that would be which section? Storage, right? So that's what some of the precautionary statements can do for you. And labels, there again, labels, they standardize them somewhat, and they're just an immediate source of information. What I wanted to point out with this, might be hard to see in the back, but over here under hazard statements, it says highly flammable liquid and vapor, and also may cause liver and kidney damage. So just see how that ties up to our pictograms. So that if you see a pictogram, that can just give you a real quick indication, okay, there's some things you really want to pay attention to when working with this chemical. Okay, the safety data sheets have 16 different sections, with the most important information, of course, is going to be at the front. And as you can see, there is a lot of information on there. So what we're just going to touch on quickly is some of the sections we might be interested in. The nice thing about these new safety data sheets is the sections are always the same. So when you go to section 1, it's always going to be the identification. It's going to tell you what the chemical is. It's going to tell you who the manufacturer is, contact information, and that type of thing. Section 2 is going to be down in here, and that's where you're going to be seeing the, hit the wrong button there. That's where you're going to be seeing your pictograms, your hazard statements, and those types of things. Next section I think we would be more interested in might be section 4 because of what? First aid. That could be another section we're interested in. Section 6 and 7, if we have a spill or we need a little more information on how to store it, they could be sections we're interested in as well. And then finally, section 8, it might have some information in there that you may not be so much interested in, but at the end of that section is your personal protective equipment. So that could also be, section 8 could be a section that we may want to refer to sometimes. So they're the main sections that I see that we could refer to. There again, when you pick up one safety data sheet to another one, you should be able to go to any of those sections that you want to go to, and it's going to be the same regardless of which chemical you're working with. Anything else on the safety data sheets that you'd like any extra explanation on? All right. We are coming into this time of year, and I know I'm loving it too. Last year was kind of a bummer for those that were skiers and snowboarders. Personally, I didn't mind it so much with not having a lot of snow. I mean, snow does give us some really beautiful sceneries. These are some pictures from past years that we had here. You can see we've had some years where we got a good bit of snow. Now, one of the things to keep in mind, I really liked this one here coming up. I thought that was pretty cool. It's on that stone wall out back here. That was really a pretty snow there. One of the things to keep in mind is, you know, we do work to keep things cleared. We take care of the sidewalks and work to keep those cleared, and then we have people come in to take care of the parking lots. The reality of it is, it's not going to be perfect. We can do all we can, put the ice melt down and all that, but just keep in mind, you know, it's not going to be perfect. There's always that possibility of hitting the slick spot. Another thing we want to look at is a magnetic lock system. And I think you probably heard a little bit about the magnetic lock system, you know, the codes and who can have them, who can't have them. We're going to look a little bit at the safety side of it. How many of you are familiar with that yellow box? How many of you have seen those? Okay. Does everybody know what they're for?
Opening the doors.
Open the doors, correct.
Override.
It's a magnetic lock override. We happen to have one here, so we'll go ahead and take a look at how that actually works. Basically, what these doors are is they have a magnet on them, electromagnet. And when you hit the keypad, it just simply turns that magnet off so you can go through the door. When the fire alarm goes off, it also turns the magnet off so you can go through the door. Now what would happen if some point you needed to get out, the keypad's not working, and it's not de-energizing that electromagnet. That's where the yellow box comes in. So basically, all you need to do is lift the cover, push it in, and now you can go through the door. The nurses should have on their key ring one of the keys to turn it off. And I think I had the right key. There we go.
The nurse has to be 5'6".
So as you can see, it's not a quick, you aren't going to be able to sneak out by not using the keypad. We're going to know. So, but that's what that's all for. It's just that emergency release in the event a magnetic lock won't release. Another thing we want to look at is what we call lockout tagout. Lockout tagout is mainly going to be initiated by us in maintenance. It's a way of shutting down equipment safely and also being able to communicate that with the people around you so someone don't start off a piece of equipment without and then injuring somebody. Years ago, I had an experience where I did something really stupid. I assumed the guy had turned off a piece of equipment that he hadn't. And when I was getting ready to crawl down in between some fan blades to grease some bearings, it started up right before I did that. Lockout tagout is designed to help prevent that kind of thing. It was a stupid mistake on my part. Fortunately, I wasn't injured because it started up in time for me to realize it. So, but that's what it's designed to prevent. So some of the things you may see in lockout tagout is this particular device here is what we would use to lock out a breaker. So let's suppose I'm going into a room and I need to work on a light or something in that room. I can go to the breaker, put this on the breaker, so someone else, I'll put a tag on it, close up the panel, lock it, and that way if someone else happens to go in there, they can see not to turn that on. One you're a little more likely to see would be the one for a switch. And basically what would happen, a lock and a tag would get put on that. And then the person that's working on it, they're technically the only one that is supposed to unlock that, and thus preventing injury to that person by someone turning on the switch when they shouldn't. Another one you may see, how many have an idea what this one might be used for? You just put a plug end in it. And you close it up, lock it, tag it, and now someone can't come and plug the thing in while you're working on it. What about this one? Any ideas? A valve. See, lockout tagout is not just electricity. It's any kind of energy. It could be air pressure, it could be water pressure, it could be steam. It could even be mechanical. It's not like a heavy-duty spring that if it would release, that's what lockout tagout is. It's not just electrical. So there again, you can lock out a water valve. So when you're working on it, someone don't come in and turn that valve on. Oh, here's why you're not getting water. This valve was off. Now, also gonna look at contingency plans. What are some of the things that we have in place? And we're all familiar with the utility interruptions. We've all had those experiences at home, right? Where you've been without power for a while, or maybe, I remember in our neighborhood for a while, they changed our supplier of water. The new supplier had a lot more pressure, so they were blowing a main about every day. They'd no sooner and get one fixed, and someone else's yard would start bubbling up water. So they were in there till they finally got that taken care of. So you have interruptions in utilities. When it comes to the electrical power, we have 3 different generators. We got one for each facility, the Shook quarters and the rehab center. And in the Shook, that one does not, yeah, that one runs the elevator. Okay, am I doing, yeah, the Shook, okay, I think we're doing the quarters now. All right, the quarters does not run the elevator. We do have, it runs the fire alarm system, and also we have power down to the med room, so the computers and those type of things can keep running. Of course, there's going to be emergency lights, etc. as well. Now on the Shook side, and that, like I said, that one does not run the elevator. However, with the Shook, it will run the elevators over there. And the other thing to look for there, how many of you ever seen the red receptacles in the hallway? Right around the fire doors or smoke doors? That simply means that's an outlet that's on the generator. And so if you would happen to need power or during a power outage, you could plug into that. Again, med rooms also have power as well to be able to keep the computers and those types of things running as well. Water, we keep a lot of water on hand, and some of you may have seen a bunch of water sitting out back a few weeks ago. Remember that? Thank you to everyone who took some water along. Basically what that was our water that we were keeping on hand got to the point it expired, so we needed to replace it. So that's where that came from. And we keep a 3-day supply on hand. So you can imagine, taking into account all the residents and employees, both sides, you know, it's a few gallons of water. Of course, we have to also have contingency plans for both Mother Nature and man-made, which I'm sure, I think you already saw some of the videos for the active shooter. You know, so unfortunately, there's some things like that we need to be aware of nowadays. But Mother Nature, we all have faced the severe thunderstorms, the tornado watches, floods, that type of thing. In each department, there is one of these manuals, the Emergency Preparedness Manual.
Maintenance calls 2250.
So there again,
Maintenance
it probably wouldn't be a
2250.
bad idea for you just to take a look, see if you can find out where that's at in the event you ever need it. And in the front there, there's a list of codes. Now, some of these codes are that you may have heard, especially during the summer. What is the one we often hear during the summer? Any idea? Yeah, code pink, severe thunderstorm. Another one we hear occasionally is code gray, which is tornado. Now, some of the codes, when they get called overhead, you may have time to go look at the manual and see what you need to do. That's what they're there for. There are some other codes that if you hear them, especially like code red, which would be the fire alarm going off, probably not a good time to go to the manual to figure out what you need to do. If we do have to evacuate the facility, over in the quarters side, we are going to go across Queen Street to the employee parking lot. And then on the Shook side, we are going to go across the alley to the employee park in the county parking lot over there. A couple of things to keep in mind, just to FYI, this row right here is Shook parking. Everything else is county parking. And since the Wellness Center has opened up, these first 3 stalls are now designated for patients coming into the Wellness Center. And that signage was just put up very recently since they opened. One of the things you want to keep in mind, if we do have to evacuate, you want to get back far enough away from the building that if the walls were to happen to start coming down, you're not close to them. You want to be back far enough away that you wouldn't get hurt from the falling walls. Recommendation is away from the building as distance away from the building as the building is tall. So just to kind of keep that in mind. And if we actually need to go off-site across Second Street, there's Trinity, the Trinity Church over there. And what we do there is if you go across the Second Street, across the alley, and then you're coming up, this is from the other end of the alley, you're coming up here. When you get here to the back of the fellowship hall, you are then going to just go up there and into the back door. And we have a key to that door, which is in the key box behind the reception desk. Nurses should have, the RN should have that key to the key box on her key ring. And then the second place, if we need to, is the church down on the square with a real tall steeple. And I personally have not been down there. My understanding is that where we would go there would be along down Lincoln Way West and off into the side of the building. Correct, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And if we're going to evacuate, we have an order of evacuation as far as the residents and how well they're doing. The order of evacuation is we're going to start off with those that are the most mobile to those that are least mobile. So those that are up and walking, they're going to be first, followed by those in the wheelchairs, followed by those that are bedridden. Quarters, if we're evacuating out of the building, same thing. However, what we have found is during fire drills in front of quarters, we have an 8-minute time limit. If they do not get to their evacuated spot, which is in the stairwell, within 8 minutes, that means we have to do the drill over. So what we have found is those that are more independent, basically if you just see they get going, you might have to spend a little more time and focus a little more quicker on those that need some assistance. There again, knowing your residents and knowing which ones need the assistance is going to go a long way in helping us get that 8-minute time limit done. And we have had times when we haven't met that 8 minutes. Is there any questions on that so far? Okay. Buildings are divided into fire areas. So we have 3 different fire areas in our facility. Area A, just picture you're coming in off of 2nd Street to the reception desk. You're walking in the door. That is Area A. You're going to walk down the hall until you come to those doors that close during the fire, when the fire alarm goes off. You go through the doors, and at that point, what area do you think you're in? B. Yes, you're in Area B. And then you come down around the nurse's station, walk back this way, come to these double doors, go through those doors. Where are you at? In the quarters. So that's our 3 fire areas on each floor. Now we're going to have a minimum of, now this year's drills are a little